Welcome to the 2014 District of Columbia Awards for Excellence in Historic Preservation. Since 2003, the district government has honored over 140 outstanding projects, programs, and individuals for exemplary work and commitment to historic preservation in Washington, D.C. This year, another 45 individuals, businesses, district agencies, and local organizations are honored for their work on 9 award-winning projects showcasing the city's rich history. Because the mayor has another engagement this evening and has honored us by coming here first, I'd like to first introduce to you the mayor of the District of Columbia. During his tenure and service to D.C., Mayor Gray has proven himself an ardent friend and supporter of historic preservation. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Gray.
Thank you very much, Ellen, and good evening, everybody. Are you out there? It's great to be able to be here at Constitution Hall tonight. And before I launch into my brief comments, I do want to thank Ellen again for her willingness, as you say, OP2. She did an outstanding job as the director for several years, went off to do other things, and then as we reached out to say we have an opportunity for you, Ellen, you know, unprecedented to be the director for the second time of the Office of Planning. So how about a big hand for Ellen McCarthy and the work that she does? I want to thank the President General, which is it's a great title, Young, and the DAR for supporting this 2014 awards program. And I'm delighted because I was an awardee. I've been a big supporter of these awards year in and year out, and a big supporter of our historic preservation program here in the District of Columbia. So it has special significance for me. Let me extend my congratulations to all the honorees tonight, and I think there are 9 or 10 or somewhere thereabouts. How about a big hand for the honorees, and you'll get a chance to do that more. The projects that are being honored tonight, that are receiving awards, represent an investment, an amazing investment of $187 million in historic landmarks and historic districts in our great city. We're certainly committed in this administration to being able to further historic preservation, and I'm delighted that we've been able to invest more than in grants, more than $3 million in grants going to homeowners, to 165 families in a dozen historic districts, most notably LeDroit Park and historic Anacostia on the east end of the District of Columbia. Almost every project tonight is an example of sustainable architecture and green building technology. In fact, 3 of the awarded projects have actually achieved LEED certification, and that is notable, ladies and gentlemen, especially for me as somebody who is a real sustainable DC advocate. So how about a big hand for the folks who have achieved LEED certification? You know, I would love to be able to say I understand why nobody came down to these seats but the 5 people who are sitting off to my left. But it's almost like church, Ellen, where nobody wants to sit in the front pew. We're also proud tonight of the HPERG Chairs Award that is being accorded. That is being awarded to one of our high schools that has undergone a very significant modernization, and that is Francis L. Cardozo High School. And for those of you who have not been there, you have really missed a treat. Cardozo High School goes back, I don't know, many, many years, back to, I think, 1913 or 1916 or somewhere thereabouts. And it is absolutely phenomenal what has been done in terms of the restoration of that building. There are, well, you'll hear about it. You don't need me to tell you about it. You'll hear about it and probably see in the video, you know, some of what has been done at the school. I also want to say congratulations to one other person who is being awarded tonight a Lifetime Achievement Award, who has done so much for this city, and that is Doug Jamal. Doug is a friend. As you will hear again later, he purchased his first commercial property on 7th Street, and I think that was more than 30 years ago, 32 or 33 years ago, and he hasn't stopped since being such an integral part of our city. So, Doug, I want to thank you for your work on behalf of the District of Columbia and what you've done to help us move our city to where it is today. And I know you got so many more things that you are doing and you're going to do in the District of Columbia. So, again, I'm going to ask people to join me in a big hand for you, and they will get a chance to do it several more times tonight. Big hand for Doug Jamal. Again, thank you all for coming out. When I saw it was going to be Constitution Hall, I said, boy, we can expect a big crowd tonight, can't we? And this may be, just looking at the number of people out, it may be the biggest crowd that we've had ever. We filled up a few places, but none the size of Constitution Hall. So thank you all very much. Enjoy your evening. And once again, congratulations to the awardees.
Thank you, Mayor Gray. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the hardworking members of the Historic Preservation Review Board who are present tonight. Please stand. Razia Ali, Maria Casarella, Graham Davidson, Nancy Metzger, Joseph Taylor, and Charles Wilson. And, of course, our chair, Gretchen Fahler, who you will be hearing from very shortly. You cannot... Any of you who have brought projects before HPRB know it, but those who are not aware of it, the unbelievable number of hours that our board members spend both before those hearing dates poring over plans and staff reports, and then sitting there patiently listening to the input from the people who are testifying. It's just a really wonderful service to the District of Columbia, and we are very grateful. In addition, I would like to acknowledge the following guests. I'll go through the list, and please hold your applause, and then we can salute them all at the end. Ward 6 Council Member Tommy Wells. I know has indicated he's coming. He might not have made it here yet. Former HPRB chairs Tersh Boasberg and Catherine Buell. Former Mayor's Agent for Historic Preservation Ro Quander. National Council of State Historic Preservation Officers Executive Director Eric Hine, and National Capital Planning Commission Executive Director Marcel Acosta. Thank you. This event is always such a wonderful celebration of preservation, and we would not be able to provide it at no cost to you attendees without the very generous support of our sponsors. We particularly want to thank the DC Preservation League as the event's perennial partner. Aren't we supposed to? Where's Bruce? And the Daughters of the American Revolution for generously hosting tonight's event. We also want to thank the following businesses whose donations make tonight's reception possible. Our landmark partner, Douglas Development Corporation. Thank you very much. Our capstone partners, Antonovich Associates and GCS Siegel LLC. Our keystone partners, Buyer Blinder Bell Architects and Planners, LLP, Bonstra Hairsign Architects, Brian Cave, LLP, East Bank, Eric Colbert and Associates, PC, EHT Traceries, First Potomac Realty Trust, Kindy French and Emmanuel Friedman, the JBG Companies, Miller and Long Concrete Construction DC, Inc., Penny Design Group, Property Group Partners, Trump Hotel Collection, U.S. Bancorp, Wagner Roofing Company, Winmar Construction, and Zuckerman Gravely Management. Thank you. Our cornerstone partners, Louis Berger Group, Consigli Construction Company, Forest City, Washington, Hartman Cox Architects, P.N. Hoffman, Quinn Evans Architects, and Smith Group, JJR. Thank you. Our foundation partners, the Chrisman Company, James G. Davis Construction Corporation, Holland and Knight, LLP, and Keast and Hood Structural Engineers, along with Stantec and Whiting Turner Contracting Company. Thank you. Another important partner in our historic preservation efforts and the co-sponsor of tonight's event is the DC Preservation League. For more than 4 decades, DC Preservation League has helped preserve and protect the historic heritage and built environment of Washington through public advocacy and education. Please welcome Edward D. Dunson, Jr., President of DC Preservation League, for additional remarks. Ed?
Thank you, Ellen. Tonight I'm going to make this short. As most people know, I will probably take as much time as is given, but I just want to first just acknowledge again, my name is Edward Dunson. I'm president of the DC Preservation League, and proud member of a former member of the HPRB, and I'd like to join the ranks of those that are here today. And I also want to acknowledge the group that's out here, all of you who support preservation, whether you're members of organizations or single individual families, friends, whatever. There's a place for you all, and because of you, preservation here in the city of Washington, D.C. is in good hands. On behalf of the D.C. Preservation League, I would like to thank you all for attending this event. DC Preservation League is proud to co-sponsor this event again this year, and it's an important element in the outreach programming for not only the organization but for the city as well. DCPL would like to thank our organizational partners and individual event sponsors. Those have been named so far. It is through your financial support and the many free events like this one are made possible. Finally, for those of you who are DCPL members, we thank you for your continued support. For those of you who are not members, I encourage you to become a member tonight and help DCPL continue to protect Washington's past for current and future generations to enjoy. Thank you again for your continued support of the historic preservation in the District of Columbia. Congratulations to all awardees, those to come, and we hope that all of you enjoy the evening. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you for DCPL's role in this event. I'd also like you to please welcome Lynn Forney Young, President General, National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution, our generous host this evening, and one of our awardees. I mentioned to Lynn earlier, I have this distinct memory of being in the audience where you're sitting as a 12-year-old, raptly watching Simon and Garfunkel appear. So I am thrilled to get to stand on the same stage, and very grateful for the DAR to give this venue, this wonderful venue, to us for free this evening. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellen. On behalf of the 177,000 members of the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution, welcome to Constitution Hall and to the national headquarters of the DAR. Our headquarters complex is actually 3 adjoined buildings, 2 of which are on the National Register of Historic Places. Memorial Continental Hall, where our lay lights are located, which was begun in 1905, and here in Constitution Hall, which was built in 1929. All of our buildings were funded entirely by our members. The DAR was founded in 1890 and is a volunteer women's service organization dedicated to historic preservation, education, and patriotism. Any woman 18 years of older who can prove lineal descent from a patriot of the American Revolution is encouraged to join us. Our members last year reported over 4 million hours of community service nationwide. It is our pleasure to welcome you to our historic headquarters as we come together to celebrate outstanding contributions to preservation in the District of Columbia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn. And although in many ways our next speaker needs no introduction, a formidable and very accomplished preservation professional in her own right, Gretchen Fehler also is the fabulous chairman of the Historic Preservation Review Board and guides that board through efficiently reviewing the hundreds of cases that are before the board. So please welcome Gretchen Fehler.
I'm a little bit shorter than everybody else, I think. Well, thank you, Alan. It's my pleasure to serve as the chair of the Historic Preservation Review Board. And as the chair, my colleagues and I review a wide variety of historic preservation projects during our public meetings. It's exciting and challenging to see the projects diverse in their location, size, complexity, and working with our goal to guide the government and the public on preservation matters to develop the best possible solutions for the district. So you can imagine that the challenge we had with the variety and quality of the submissions was really formidable this year. The real challenge was really finding those that merited selection from a quality of a pool that had a significant quality and development. And so we're really excited to be celebrating the several here from a deep pool that really are exceptionally well designed and executed. Bricks and mortar, of course, are only a part of preservation. So tonight we're pleased to recognize awardees for excellence in archaeology, educational programming, and of course, the Lifetime Achievement Award for one individual's personal and professional commitment to historic preservation in the city of Washington. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize the awards jury. So if you would please hold your applause, and if you're here, would you please stand when I mention your name? Walt Kane, Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner, Single Member District 2F4. Steve Calcott, Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, DC Historic Preservation Office. Deborah Crane Kemp, Ward 7 Planner, DC Office of Planning. Reginald Herndon, General Manager and Co-Founder of Capital Construction Group, LLC. Jennifer Hirsch, Federal Preservation Officer, National Capital Planning Commission. Stephen Kitterman, Program Director, McKissick & McKissick. Rebecca Miller, Executive Director, DC Preservation League. And myself, Gretchen Fehler, the Chair of the District Historic Preservation Review Board. Please extend a thank you to all of them for their hard work. Now, you've all heard the phrase that preservation starts at home. But while Washington's high-dollar commercial and institutional rehabilitation projects receive most of the attention in town, the vast majority of preservation efforts in the city are carried out through homeowners who simply love their houses and their communities. Here's the story of one homeowner and her extraordinary efforts in LeDroit Park.
The northwest neighborhood of LeDroit Park was one of the first suburbs of Washington, D.C. Founded in the late 1800s by Amzi Barbar, the neighborhood features Victorian mansions, houses, and row houses. The original 64 houses were built so that no two were alike. In 2001, Rebecca Westcott moved into her row house on 6th Street.
And when I purchased the house, it had just been renovated, but they put cedar siding on it, which wasn't really historically accurate, and it started to buckle and split, and it just looked really bad. So I just wanted to get the outside fixed.
What started as a siding replacement soon grew into a more involved total exterior renovation.
Well, I originally just planned to replace the siding, and there was this really ugly structure in the back that definitely was not original. It was a screened-in porch, and I just wanted to remove that and do the siding. And then I ended up replacing all the windows and all the doors, and then the porch, and then I added a fence.
Researching the architectural features of her home, Westcott found a book titled LeDroit Park Conserved, which was published by the District of Columbia in 1979. In it, she found that her home was considered a Queen Anne frame row house and consulted diagrams that highlighted the architectural features.
I started, with the back, we just removed that structure, and then they did the siding on the back first. They found 4 other layers of siding underneath it. So that really increased the labor because they had to remove all that. And then there was no insulation, which explains why the back of the house was so cold. So it became a bigger job already. And then my windows they're wood, they were all rotted. Then they moved to the front, and same thing, all the windows had to be removed. So I had to go back and get permits for the windows, which I wasn't expecting. And finally, when the front was done, the porch looked just so bad that I got a permit to redo the porch.
The completed project contributes to the visual and historic quality of the neighborhood. With additional details such as recreated inset panels, spindles outlining the front bay windows, and new exterior front doors, the home has set an example for others in the neighborhood.
Some of the neighbors had told me that it has inspired them to either repair or update a few of the things in their houses. It adds to the sense of pride and community.
Redevelopment parcels in Washington's historic downtown are becoming few and far between. And the pressure for density can sometimes come into conflict with preservation goals. Our next design and construction award winner rehabilitated and expanded a signature corner in the Chinatown neighborhood while successfully preserving the scale and feel of the Chinatown district.
In the bustling Chinatown neighborhood, a grouping of 6 unused historic buildings sat on the corner of 7th and 8th Streets.
With Douglas Development and McCaffrey Interests on the ownership group, both being such experienced developers in retail, the struggle here really for the conversion of a historic structure is to make the building as flexible as possible for any kind of retail use over time, while at the same time maintaining as much of the original historic fabric as possible.
And then there were numerous changes to this building and the adjacent buildings over time to accommodate the retail tenants. As certain retail establishments expanded, there were openings cut in the buildings. The buildings were altered to really make them one building. In 1899, John Rudin opened his furniture business here. He was here till about 1910, and then after that, the National Furniture Company occupied the building. So it was really occupied for a lot of its history by furniture companies, which was very typical of this block of 7th Street.
Previous proposals for the site envisioned a much larger development with the addition of a 10-story building. Art Square is significantly smaller, renovating the existing structures and adding only a setback penthouse.
So when there are multiple buildings put together like this, or like the Wonder Bread factory, which was also built over numerous phases, there's lots of different structural systems. All the floor elevations are at different heights because it's been built over time. Some of those previous structures had been connected, others had not. So the goal was really to analyze what was truly historic, what was truly important to save, and at the same time to understand how could the building function altogether.
Rehabilitation work included repairing and restoring exterior masonry and roof parapets, replacement of wood windows, and restoration of cornices and trim. The first 2 floors of the building are dedicated to retail. The upper floors were converted to office space and are currently used by the Auto Alliance.
Met with a broker and we drew a circle around where we were and nothing really fit. And the broker said, you know, we have another option and it's outside the perimeter we talked about in Chinatown. It's a Jamal property. And I said, Jamal, great experience before, let's do it again. So we came here and instantly fell in love with this project. We walked in the building, it was in the process of being gutted, but right away we saw the richness of the history and the promise of the future, and that's really what Jamal is doing. It marries the future and the past in a way that shows dynamism, vitality, and it's just been a fantastic experience.
Accepting the award for Arch Square at 801 7th Street Northwest tonight are the Douglas Development Corporation, R2L Architects, Atunovich Architects, Winmar Construction, EHT Traceries Incorporated, and McCaffrey Interests. From Auto Row to riots to red light district to a burgeoning commercial corridor filled with restaurants and retail. Yes, 14th Street has been dramatically transformed into one of the hottest areas of the city. The next 2 design and construction awards highlight that role that preservation has played in the remarkable change of this area.
Stephen Starr was the person who actually found the building. He found it probably about driving by about 4 years ago. It's like, I want to make a great restaurant. Back then it was an abandoned dry cleaner. Boarded up, a blight in the neighborhood, and so he kind of saw the potential. He saw potential of the neighborhood, 14th Street. He was told that it was under contract, but then that contract fell through. And lo and behold, 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago, we started work on the restaurant.
Under the plywood, which covered the entire upper portion of the building on the corner of 14th and Q Streets, was a vintage stone facade from the 1920s.
This building dates back to approximately the 1920s. We think it was one of the showrooms, maybe one of the lesser showrooms. This was once known as Automobile Row. There are a lot of showrooms for the cars of the day. I know the building up the block was the Packard showroom. So the facade was totally intact, although it was boarded up and in poor shape. So we saw the potential of it.
When you go in with a developer and you do a super block, you knock out the evolution of a neighborhood. So New York's a good example of that. It doesn't have a memory. It erases its past very quickly. What makes a neighborhood are all the individual stores that open, the individual restaurants, the people that live in the neighborhood who take a 22-foot wide retail space and make it work, and then maybe take the neighboring store and build and expand their restaurant. That's what's the evolution of a neighborhood.
Some of the restoration took the form of replacing and resetting missing decorative stone medallions, repairing and repainting the original copper cornice, and replicating portions of the damaged steel sash.
We created a new room along Q Street, we call it the garden room, that opens up onto a large patio. That was where the original garage doors were for the laundromat. Before that, I believe, a service station. So creating a space, a big garden space, a garden room, and a large patio for outdoor dining, which is very popular here in D.C. So totally kind of transforming the look of the building at the side. So basically restoring the exterior, yet enhancing it with the new windows.
With its popularity, Le Diplomat has become a new anchor for the resurgent 14th Street corridor, bringing a nondescript building back to life.
Accepting the award tonight for Le Diplomat Restaurant is Star Restaurants, Stokes Architecture, Sean Hausman Design, and Brian Order Lighting Design.
The Northern Exchange Building at the corner of 14th and R Streets Northwest was a sizable but uninhabited structure owned by the telephone company Verizon.
When the building was first built, it actually was constructed to provide the exchange for 2,500 of the 12,000 telephones that existed in the District of Columbia. Just think about that. You know, today you could walk down the street and see 2,500 telephones probably. The building was designed to be an exchange, the Northern Exchange for the Chesapeake and Potomac Telephone Company, CMP Telephone. And at the time, if you know telephone history, I mean, all the telephone companies were all interconnected, but they were regionally organized so that they could run the operations within a particular area. So CNP, Chesapeake and Potomac, was the area for the District of Columbia.
When we first purchased this building, it was very kind of monumental in terms of its nature and its size and its character as it relates to 14th Street and R Street. It's very cold, unwelcoming, and the design that Eric Colbert put together really turned it on its head. They were able to find some historic photos of storefronts that were in the building, and so that really changed the character of the building from the street perspective. And so now you turned a space that was dead, had huge bars and grates on it, because the neighborhood had kind of turned since its original building in 1903, into now, if you go out there, you have street cafe, you have people interaction, you have a livelihood and a neighborhood experience that wasn't there originally.
The new building would house residential condominiums on the upper floors and commercial space on the east side of the first floor.
Apartment buildings can only be so deep, and since this building was deeper than a typical apartment building, we cannot have windows on the northern side because it abuts the adjacent building. We had to come up with a creative solution to put apartments in the existing structure. And it has these large south-facing windows with the high ceilings, and so we were able to fit a mezzanine in, but keep the space open facing the southern end where the light comes, so that we were able to have deeper units, but we had a loft for living.
After researching old blueprints, a new cornice and brick parapet were added to capture the feeling of the original configuration.
The other thing was that we wanted to add a setback floor on the top, and we had to work very carefully with the preservationists to make sure that the addition was not visible from certain perspectives and also did not detract from the original historic character of the building.
If you take a look around, the 14th Street corridor, you see a lot of the amazing old row homes, and I think it adds a level of authenticity and grit that you can't get with the new building. It's something that's real and tangible, and it definitely reminds you of the history of where you came from, and I think that's important to keep that in mind. And I really, they just don't build the same buildings they do today as they did 100 years ago.
Associates Incorporated, Eric Colbert and Associates, Trevor Costa, Architect, EHT Tracers Incorporated. As institutions continue to grow and evolve, so must their spaces to meet program needs. Imagination and flexibility is required when taking on a former auditorium or a full building. Our next three design construction awardees have shown their ability to adapt their respective historic buildings in an effort to fulfill their missions and make a lasting impact on our city with their stewardship.
The library, located in Memorial Continental Hall in the headquarters of the Daughters of the American Revolution, is bathed in light from an impressive glass ceiling illuminated by the skylight above.
The ceiling of what is now our library is a beautiful glass panels. Each one is about 9 foot by 8 foot. There are 25 of them. The total area of the library is 60 feet by 60 feet. Each one is a little bit different from another, and they're very ornate and decorative. They had become cloudy with age, and basically they were just separating from the structure, and they needed to be preserved.
We walked around on the top of the laylights in that attic space between the laylights and the skylight, and what we found was a good bit of staining, water staining that had leaked in. overspray from painting, so that discolored the edges of the glass, and we did see a fair number of broken pieces of glass, as well as at least 2 inches of deflection where the glass had actually bent out of plane from its armature.
Memorial Continental Hall is the oldest building of the DAR complex. It was designed in 1905 by Edward Pierce Casey, designer of the Library of Congress. Designated as a registered National Historic Landmark, the library was once the main auditorium for the organization.
We are very much taking into account the desires of DAR and the President General, Mrs. Wright at the time, and her main thrust was that we were to preserve as much historic material as possible.
This was an amazing collaborative effort between Quinn Evans Architects, the Chrisman Company, the Feminella and Associates, and the Hutchison United Rigging Company, as well as through the leadership of Marianne Wright, who was then President General of the DAR, who led our fundraising effort, and all the members who donated over $1.7 million to make this project possible.
Each panel was removed from the ceiling and carefully packed and shipped to Feminella and Associates in New York for restoration work.
Watching them move that first panel and take it down all those feet and drop it down to the ground, and we all held our breath the entire time. Even looking at photos now, I still hold my breath and realize it's not even moving.
You were on edge as you watched them slowly lower to the ground. And so once they were safely on the ground, they then had to be safely transported to Art Feminella's shop up in New York. He disassembled every single piece, took apart all the cane, separated all the glass, cleaned every piece of glass, repaired any broken pieces. If it's just a single break, he can glue it back together again.
After Feminella and Associates completed the restoration work, the panels were reinstalled. 90% of the original glass was retained, and a new support system was added to provide greater structural capacity to each panel.
I'm amazed at the results of the restoration. I can tell you that before, our library was fairly dim because the glass was so cloudy. Now it is so crisp and clean and bright that even some of our volunteers who work on the balcony wind up having to wear sun visors because it's such a bright, welcoming environment. It's absolutely gorgeous. I invite everyone to come see them.
The DAR Library Reading Room Daylight Project tonight are the Daughters of the American Revolution, Quinn Evans Architects, the Chrisman Company, Feminella and Associates Incorporated, and Hutchison United Rigging.
The Yuma Study Center is to provide program support and to inspire women of all ages to, grow in their professional life, their spiritual life, their social life. So we work with young girls from the time they're in 6th grade into senior citizens, like myself.
Located in the Tenleytown neighborhood, the building that now houses the Yuma Study Center has been in continuous use since it was built in 1928 by the Sisters of Bon Secours, a Roman Catholic religious congregation specializing in nursing.
And when they first came, they lived in what was then the St. Anne's Rectory, which was right next door. However, as time went on, at first there was a typhoid epidemic, and I think just after the First World War there was an influenza epidemic, and they felt they needed more sisters, and of course they were going to outgrow the rectory. And an opportunity came to buy this land, which they did, and in the late 1920s built the convent and moved into it.
Designed by architect Maurice F. Moore, the building is an example of the late phase of the Italianate style, with walls 1 foot in width and a roof covered in a variegated green tile. As nursing evolved into a professional medical career, the sisters would sell the property to the French International School in 1966. In 1975, the building was sold to the Heights Foundation and would house the first home of the Oakcrest School for Girls. The Yuma Study Center acquired the title for the building in 2008.
We started out with really trying to understand the context and the history of the building. That's a common theme with Quinn Evans Architects. With that understanding, we like to decide what is valuable, what do you keep first, okay? And then from there, we start to look at how to overlay the owner's program In this case, they wanted to introduce a whole wing of living quarters onto a school function, a school and chapel function. And so it's a dialogue. The new architecture results from a interplay between the existing building and the new space that we need to add.
The project tripled the size of the facility, adding 26,000 square feet, while still keeping the original convent building intact.
There's a beautiful porch immediately to my right, and that's a west porch. It was an arcaded porch. Previously, they had expanded this room out into it and taken the porch as part of interior space, and really lost the character of the colonnade that faces the courtyard there. So we were able to recapture the original character of the colonnade, which actually brought back the historic character of it, and it forms a very important facade of the four sides that make up the courtyard.
The Historical Society was invited to come after the building was finished, and everybody was thrilled. Everybody thought, oh my goodness, this is really well done. And I believe it met Dorothy's expectations, and it certainly met ours. And my personal primary concern was that the old building be restored, and it was.
Accepting the award for the Yuma Center on the Method of Bone Support, the Yuma Study Center, Quinn Evans Architects, Forrester Construction Company, At Site Incorporated, and the Tenleytown Historical Society.
The Meridian Public Charter School was located in the Shaw neighborhood and in need of a new space for its 600 students. Within close proximity, the old Harrison Elementary School became available, and the school began to look at options to modify the space to fit its needs.
We worked with the school. We saw where they currently existed, which was in an old laundromat, and they had broken up the space into many different little pigeonhole pieces and pieced together the best that they could. And when we went to the new space to see how they would fit in there, was a big, expansive, old DC school that just looked like a great fit for them.
The school's original north wing was built in 1897 and dominated by large corner brick turrets, which were then replicated during a south wing addition in 1935. Its original design was by the Office of the Building Inspector under Edward Clark, architect of the Capitol. It was built in a Romanesque style and named for the 9th President of the United States, William Henry Harrison.
A very old building, a beautiful old building with great bones, but it had been neglected. Not as badly as some buildings can be of that age, but at the same time, it wasn't in great shape. The windows were in very bad shape. It was a fascinating building because it was designed in two parts, spanning from actually the very beginning of the 20th century, the end of the 19th century. And it was two anchors that were connected by a spine in between, which created a sort of U shape or an H shape. So it had great initial bones inside, good classrooms, really high ceilings, lots of good light, needed a whole lot of loving care, but at the same time it had great opportunities given the sort of what was not built in the middle, which was once intended to be built and never happened.
The new construction would respect the outer shell of the historic building with updated windows and entrances designed to match the original style and intent. One of the design challenges was the lack of large gathering spaces that were needed for a modern school.
One of our earliest strategies or goals was to get back to a point where we could, through an addition, create spaces that kept the original walls intact, corridors, walls, large classrooms. So ultimately the design solution was to add a three-story structure in the middle, which was a gym, a media center, and a cafeteria, the three biggest spaces in the school, and let the classrooms fit into where the classrooms wanted to fit in.
We tried to make this look different so that it would stand out and you would know that this is a historic building, and what we've added is something completely different. We purposely picked brick that was sort of an opposite color to what it was and not something to match it, so that you would know this is new, this is old, and recognize that.
In any community, I think that when we can take the historic structures and reinvigorate them, reinvent them, give them new purpose, obviously it imbues the community with a sense of history that's fantastic. So personally what I like about a community is when you can have that sense of history and actually not simply as an artifact. It's there as an artifact, but I love to be able to repurpose a building, reinvigorate it, and let the old and the new coexist together.
When you bring something up to a working, living building, people want to be in that community. They want to send their kids there. They want to live there. So this building brings that back, and the school also embraces the community, has community meetings there. The kids use the park next door. All the kids walk there. It's not like they're bused from different places. So it's their school. It's their community school. So I think it's important.
Accepting the award tonight for the Meridian Public Charter School Harrison School are Meridian Public Charter School, Bowie Gridley Architects, Forrester Construction Company, and Brailsford and Dunlevy.
It's a little change of pace here. Our next award digs deep, literally, into the nitty-gritty of historic preservation, transforming the United States Government Hospital for the Insane into consolidated headquarters for the Department of Homeland Security, presented a unique opportunity to investigate and interpret a campus whose history covers early Native American settlements up until now in modern times. Excuse me. This award for archaeology and education acknowledges GSA's efforts to inform and engage the public on the rich history of the St. Elizabeth's Hospital National Historic Landmark.
St. Elizabeth's Hospital, located in southeast Washington, D.C., opened in 1855 for the care of the mentally ill residents of the District of Columbia, as well as those in the Army and Navy. Eventually consisting of more than 100 buildings on more than 300 acres, the hospital was its own little village within the city.
What we have here is a site that is largely intact and is very important for so many different reasons. It's really a rare opportunity to see physically and then to help interpret a whole village and a whole way of life for patients, for doctors, for a whole part of the city. So it is possible to do the kind of research both on site and in archives, and then through interpretation, to bring the story of St. Elizabeth's to life. And it does touch on so many parts of Washington history, community history here, and national history.
As the General Services Administration redeveloped the West Campus of the hospital, they implemented an archaeological resources plan to help investigate the site during the construction process, as well as an education effort to present the history to the public. As part of that education effort, it commissioned Thomas Otto to write a 300-page narrative book on the history of St. Elizabeth's.
There were little bits and pieces of history about the hospital over the years, but not all of it was well documented, and some of it was kind of based on, kind of local lore and not always traceable to facts. At the National Archives, there's hundreds of boxes of material on the hospital's history from the beginning to about the 1980s, and there are even 356 linear feet of patient files that, as long as they're at least 75 years old, you can even go back and look at those. So there was more information than one could get through almost in a lifetime in researching the hospital.
In 1852, Congress appropriated $100,000 to create a hospital for the mentally ill. President Fillmore asked Dorothea Dix, a social reformer, and Dr. Charles Nichols, a physician for the mentally ill, to design the hospital.
And the general thought was that the buildings needed to have good views for patients, they needed to have good access to air and light, and provide a safe atmosphere for the patients. So the building was laid out in an echelon, kind of a main building and then wings that step back, and that allowed the views and the air and the light. And the location, of course, here in Anacostia also provided a kind of pastoral setting, but still with a connection and with views to the city. Because it was at this time that psychiatric care more or less had to do with environment, and they didn't necessarily know a lot of the causes of any of the illnesses, or really even how to treat them. And so it really was, their theory was that it was about environment, and the calmer and more idyllic the environment, the better it would be for the patients.
The book relies almost entirely on primary source material found in various archives in the district. It included personal letters, patient records, internal memos, photographs, and myriad other types of documents. It revealed a self-sustaining institution.
I think one of the really amazing things about the hospital is that it was so self-sufficient for so many years. In addition to growing a lot of their own food, they had their own dairy herd, they had chickens and pigs, they made mattresses, they made brooms, they made a lot of the clothing by the staff, for the staff and the patients was made on site. And so many aspects of daily life were actually performed by employees or patients as part of their therapy. And it really was kind of its own community.
One of the things about archaeology is that it has the ability to give voice to the voiceless. And by that I mean, you know, the doctors here at St. Elizabeth's, the administrators, there's reams of documentation that tell their side of the story. There's really very little documentation from the patients themselves. But the material culture that we found on campus here can tell the story of patients at St. Elizabeth's.
Beginning in 2004, archaeological work began on the west campus of the hospital, first through research and data collection, and then through physical site investigation. Archaeologists used innovative techniques such as geoarchaeology that studies the soil to determine potential sites of early native settlements, and GIS modeling to map the campus for digs.
In some instances, we used shovels and did shovel test pits to try and find artifacts below the surface. In quite a few of the areas, though, at St. Elizabeth's, a lot of fill had been placed on the original land surface, so we actually had to take backhoes to strip the fill off to try and get down to that original land surface. So once we did that, we were able to use our traditional techniques of doing shovel test pits or test units to look for artifacts.
The West Campus is now a level 5 security facility, and the community just can't walk on the grounds anymore. So in order to keep us connected, they conducted these tours that continue to give us access to the campus and to also give us some idea of how the development was going.
This was GSA's goal, was to make as much available. Our partners from DC Preservation League, Rebecca Miller and Amanda McDonald and Howard Berger frequently, they're out here the third Saturday of every month, helping us lead the tours of the campus. They do all of the reservations and handle that for us. And it's really extraordinary. We frequently have 70 or 80 people who come out, and so it's really incumbent upon us to use every means possible to share the story of the campus, but also physically to show the campus.
I think that historic preservation is good because when you look at St. Elizabeth's, both the East Campus and the West Campus, they don't make buildings like that. They don't build buildings like that anymore. And the architecture is just absolutely incredible. When you look at the roofs, for example, they don't make them like that anymore. And St. E's was designed to be like a self-sustaining little city within the District of Columbia because it was caring for the mentally ill. I think that preserving that history makes that particular campus very rich.
Accepting the award for the efforts of the St. Elizabeth's for the first phase archaeology project and the book St. Elizabeth's, A History, in the United States General Services Administration, Stantec, Thomas Otto, and the Louis Berger Group, Incorporated.
So now we come to the HPRB Chairman's Award. During the first half of the 20th century, the District of Columbia took on a major public building campaign to ease overcrowding in the schools. By the end of the century, these schools were not just not meeting the needs of our children. In 2007, the city began its Public Schools Modernization and Stabilization Project with the goal of fully modernizing all 123 elementary, middle, and high school buildings, along with the related administrative and support facilities. This year's Chairman Award is presented to the government for a project that celebrates both the cherished history of our schools and the commitment to our city's youth.
Cardozo Education Campus, located in the Columbia Heights neighborhood, is perched on a ridge with a sweeping view toward downtown Washington.
The title of our RFP was Beacon on the Hill, because we saw that the old Central High Cardozo was really essentially supposed to be this beacon on the hill. It's built on this plateau overlooking the Potomac River Valley, and it had just kind of come under a little bit of disrepair and just needed a little bit of sprucing up.
Built in 1916, the original school was called Central High. It taught an all-white student body through the early 20th century. When enrollment for the school began to dwindle in the 1940s, district officials decided to move the all-black Cardozo High School, which had outgrown its building, into the Centro space. The school was integrated for all races in 1954.
Well, I think the things that we noticed, one, were that the building was very anonymous because the hallways were very large, circulation patterns were difficult to understand or see. Obviously, the building hadn't been well cared for in a time, but there were lots of good structure to the bones. But we did see that it needed to be modernized to work with the 21st century sort of learning environments that they were trying to create.
One of the first things we did was look at how the building worked. And because it was originally designed as a kind of a boys and girls school, however, it was during a time when they didn't really interact. So there was a boys wing and a girls wing, which made it frustrating in today's schools because they couldn't really circulate. So we looked into how to improve the circulation, and in order to solve that issue, we added a center stair in the center of the building as you come in. That allowed us to have a backdrop. That's a historic mural that went behind that.
Students were able to actually look at the mural and see, Cardozo used to be Central High School, and it actually became like a history lesson, beginning to talk to the students about, how we went from being in Central to currently, Francis L. Cardozo, and also about, the different locations where the school has been in the past.
Cardozo originally had two gyms, a boys' gym and a girls' gym, both of which were not regulation. The students at the school had not seen a home basketball game since 1954. A new gym was added, maintaining existing historic views.
To be sensitive to the existing school and to the community, that gym building is actually sunken down so that it doesn't tower over or appear to compete with the existing building.
Technology enhancements were made, adding data projectors and interactive whiteboards to classrooms. In addition, new student environments were created, such as flexible learning spaces and computer labs.
And the students were, when they walked in, their mouths were wide open. They were like, this is not the same school that we left. Many of them just stood in silence and just in awe of just how beautiful the building was.
Accepting the award tonight for the Francis L. Cardozo High School are the District of Columbia, Department of General Services, Hartman Cox Architects, Grimm & Parker Architects, and GCS Siegel LLC.
The State Historic Preservation Officers Award is typically given to a federal agency who, in working with our office, undertake fantastic preservation projects. Earthquakes were not something that most Washingtonians thought much about prior to August 23rd, 2011. Following that day's tremor, damage was reported throughout the city, many to our older buildings. The Sherman Building on the campus of the Armed Forces Retirement Home was hit particularly hard, and tonight we're pleased to present the State Historic Preservation Officers Award to the team of preservation professionals who work to stabilize, rebuild, and restore this National Historic Landmark.
heard this noise outside from the old Scott building, and then all of a sudden the building started shaking. Being from California, I knew that was an earthquake. And after the shaking stopped, saw the damage to the Sherman building. Some of the structures at the top of the building had fallen off, and so there was quite significant damage.
The Sherman Building is one of the most distinctive buildings on the campus of the Armed Forces Retirement Home. Located off North Capitol Street in Northwest Washington, the building was constructed in 3 phases in the latter part of the 19th century. Originally a 2-story masonry structure with a modest tower, later construction phases would add a 3rd floor, ornamental parapets and turrets, and an extension of the clock tower to its current height of 130 feet. The structure has housed many functions, including a dormitory, dining hall, library, billiard hall, post office, barbershop, and canteen. It is the centerpiece of the campus and a National Historic Landmark.
You know, the earthquake that happened on August 23rd, 2011, it caused severe damage to the Sherman Building. But 200 stones fell from the Sherman Building. Some of the stones fell through the roof onto desks and chairs that were occupied just moments earlier. Some stones fell from the building outside to the ground over entrances where people were evacuating. We had the top finial from the clock tower fell 130 feet to a planting bed. So it was a lot of destruction.
What we really had to go from was the conditions of the building after the earthquake. And so we had, I think, 4 weeks from the time we got the RFP to put a price of approximately $13 million together based on pictures of stones that had fallen off the building.
You might think that task is being daunting, but really using kind of innovative software and having multiple teams that were out here in the field, we were able to look at the building on in a very short time frame and collect the information that we needed. So it's a combination of looking at the stone that was still in place and also the stones that were on the ground that had to be evaluated to determine which ones had to be replaced and which ones could be reused.
We first began by deciding how far we had to disassemble the tower. That was a big decision. How far down is enough to cover the damage? Where the cracks and joints were large enough, there wasn't a good way to repair them in place. So after that, we wanted to work through reinforcing of the tower that had a lot of factors we needed to resolve. We needed to keep it lightweight. We need to be able to work with it up high in the air off of the scaffolding. On the historic side, we really wanted to be sensitive to the existing building.
In the end, over 3,000 stones were accurately reconstructed, reusing 98% of the original pieces of hand-carved marble. The bell tower was rebuilt around a new steel frame, sensitively designed to be hidden from view. In just 2 years, with construction complete, the building is once again occupied, leaving few visible scars from the earthquake.
Accepting the award for the Sherman Building Recovery Project is the Armed Forces Retirement Home Washington, Quinn Evans Architects, the Chrisman Company, R. Brady Associates, Hales & Howe, Keyston Hood Company, Oak Grove Restoration Company, and Preservescapes Consulting, LLC.
I am so very pleased to present tonight's Lifetime Achievement Award to the incomparable Douglas Jamal. Over the past 30 years, Douglas has had a substantial and singular impact on the District of Columbia. His work in many of the city's historic commercial corridors is a creative, adaptive reuse that employs impressive office and retail strategies. His respect for historic resources has afforded new lives for buildings that may not have fared as well in other hands. And he has done it all with his unique flair. Congratulations, Douglas.
Douglas Jamal was born in Brooklyn, New York, and came to Washington in 1966. He began his career in the retail trade with a small store on 7th Street Northwest. He soon expanded into the electronics and music business, and by the mid-1980s, he had created one of the most successful retail chains in the nation. The first parcel of land he purchased was 425 7th Street in 1981, and since then he has focused on purchasing and developing distinctive commercial properties. His first property that planted the seed of historic preservation was the Park and Shop in the Cleveland Park neighborhood.
What other people saw when they saw the Park and Shop was an opportunity to develop a more ordinary Washington office building. And Doug saw an opportunity to take an old form, one of the first forms of the retail center in the age of the automobile, and rehab it and do a smaller scale renovation that would actually say something about the place and, you know, hopefully turn a profit too.
But I don't think he had had any experience in preservation per se, so it was sort of, you know, one step at a time with all of this. But it turned out he got it in the long run, and everyone was very happy with the results.
Other properties soon followed. Making a bet in the Chinatown area, Douglas began to have a vision. He began to incorporate historic preservation into his business strategy.
Washington's such a button-down town in so many ways. It's true of the real estate community. We don't have a lot of swashbucklers, and, you know, cities need that. We need somebody who says, hey, I don't care what the conventional wisdom says, I'm going to try to do something else. Doug had a different attitude toward preserving the past and going with it to create something really cool for the present. And it's a much more organic view of preservation and development than I think other developers, at least at the time, were going with.
Next, Douglas redeveloped Chinatown Row, a section of storefronts with office space above, located near the site of the MCI Center. It attracted many restaurants into the retail space. The project won a Merit Award from the Washington chapter of the American Institute of Architects in the category of Architecture Historic Resources.
My observation of Doug would be, with respect to development, he always wants to do something really well. He wants to do it really well, and he wants to express the vision. He wants the vision to come alive. He wants all that stuff, and gets in his bulldozer, and he starts the bulldozer, and he drives it to the end, and he says, look, it's finished. And that's his vision. You can start anything, finish anything, and it's all going to be successful, and don't bother me with the trivia.
After a competitive bidding process, the General Services Administration awarded the redevelopment project of LeDroit Block on F Street to Douglas Development. The site would eventually house the International Spy Museum and incorporate a new office tower and luxury apartments with the historic site.
Not sure where I first met him, but I do know that I was immediately impressed by him, not only because we both have the same hairstyles, but because he is such a vibrant, energetic, he always has a smile, and he's just a terrific person. Well, what I've never understood is how Douglas can make a good living, and I'm sure he does, and still do such great historic preservation work. Obviously, he's found a way to do both historic preservation and make a decent return, and I wish he would somehow bottle that secret and distribute it to all the developers at all the national conventions.
The Atlantic Building, Washington's first privately constructed high-rise building with elevator service, was integrated with 6 other historic buildings and facades into a 10-story trophy-class office building next to Ford's Theater.
Douglas is a developer. He wants to develop projects. He'd like to make these projects as big as possible. But he also has a sort of care and understanding for the history of Washington and is not willing to develop projects at all costs. He develops projects with an understanding that that history must be preserved.
The Woodward and Lothrop building on the corner of 10th and F Streets Northwest is one of Douglas Development's signature projects. Attaining its lasting form in 1927, the 10-story building held more than 400,000 square feet of retail space. Douglas acquired the property in 1999 and began redevelopment in 2003. The building now houses retailers H&M, Zara's, and Forever 21, as well as Madame Tussauds Wax Museum.
Unlike the more typical approach, which is from the very, very beginning driven by numbers, I think with Douglas it's really driven by love. It's driven by his love of a property. And basically, if he loves a property, typically it's because he can picture, he has a vision about it. He can imagine what he can do with it. And he's very confident. You know, he believes that ultimately others will buy into his vision, and therefore the project will ultimately succeed. So that's really how he approaches his real estate, as far as I can see.
Douglas is a remarkable man and very outgoing. I think my back is still out of position from the hugs he's given me over the years. His interests are deeply steeped in the history of the city. He loves the old buildings, loves the old environments. He invested in the city 20, 30 years ago when people didn't, and he saved many parts of historic Washington, D.C.
Douglas Jamal has left a legacy for the city with many more projects, like the Citadel on Colorama Road and the Wonder Bread Factory in the Shaw neighborhood. He continues to project his vision with current development projects like the Hex Warehouse and Uline Arena, preserving our past to help guide Washington into the future.
That's our Lifetime Achievement Award winner, Douglas Jamal.
Wow, we got a lot of work to do, my God. I want to thank all the recipients for the wonderful job that they've done on the buildings that they've restored. First and foremost, I'd like to thank my partner, Paul Milstein, for without him, I would not be here tonight. Paul, thank you very much. I was just putting on Ellen's glasses to thank a few people. Wow, thank you. We got a lot of work to do. I must be out of my mind because looking at what we've done, holy. I want to thank everybody here tonight, Edward Dunson, David Maloney, Steve Colcott, Ellen McCarthy, the architect Shalom Baranis, Gretchen Pfeiffer, my dear friend Dan McCaffrey, coming from Chicago, my statesman, my marvelous architect Joe Antubovich, Shalom Baranis, the staff at Douglas Development, the wonderful city we live in, and the rejuvenation that we're now having and affording me the opportunity to stand here tonight and be part of these great developments that I've done, that 100 years from now, someone else will be standing here doing the same thing. Thank you very much for everything that you've done. I really appreciate this award. Rebecca Miller, thank you very much. I know I left out some names. I do apologize for that. But I really, from the bottom of my heart, thank everybody here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us tonight, and now please enjoy the refreshments.